out, we're going to talk a little bit about how we make migrations count, and we're going to talk about how to prepare your organization for a planned migration. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is you need to determine the sources of your migration. Are you moving from a legacy SharePoint system into SharePoint Online? Do you have content in network drives, OneDrive, or in other areas that you need to pull into your new SharePoint Online cloud environment, or that you want to migrate out of a legacy system? It's important to understand where your content is going to come from, because you may need to make plans on how you're going to migrate that information. And you want to make sure that the critical content and tools and features that your teams use on a regular basis are addressed when you're looking to migrate into a new system. Once you've figured out all of the sources of data that will be migrated, then you want to start communicating with your teams. It's really important for the success of any migration that your organization is aware, ready, and maybe even excited for the change. Typically, you'll put together a communication plan that sort of outlines what the change entails. So we're going to move from these legacy systems and we're going to move into SharePoint Online or another platform, and then why we're doing it. We're going to centralize our content. We're going to get access anywhere, anytime. We're going to be able to use tools and features to enhance and support our day-to-day operations. By communicating early and regularly with your team members, your organization builds a readiness for the change, because we all know that change is hard, and that change that comes onto an organization without a lot of communication often stumbles and sometimes fails. Then you want to start preparing the content. So now that you know where your content is from and you've talked to your people, you want to start doing some cleanup. Decide some things about what will and will not be migrated. Typically, organizations are like pack rats. We like to keep information for a really long time. And especially if we're looking at a network system or even a legacy application system like classic SharePoint, we may be in a situation where there's duplicates of content in multiple folders or on multiple sites. Some content is particularly old, it's no longer relevant, and we want to do a bit of a cleanup exercise here. Sometimes organizations will set a date and say, okay, we're only going to move content that's 5 years or newer. Anything past that we'll keep archived. We don't need it in our new system. Cleaning up this content helps us to ensure that we're not wasting resources in the migration or spending time classifying and categorizing content that has no value to the organization. We can always still keep older content or content that we've identified to archive for historical record, but by choosing the methods or the criteria on a move forward basis, we can ensure that the new environment is clean, that we haven't duplicated content in multiple places, and that everybody kind of has an ability to get relevant items that they need when they need it. Once we've prepared our content, then we want to start to identify what kind of metadata, what kind of classifications do we want to apply to this content. In a finance example, we might have a library for finance that has accounts receivable, accounts payable, and month end. What kind of information would we want to associate with those types of files? Perhaps on accounts payable and accounts receivable, it's the client slash vendor. We need to know who is either paying us or we are paying. How much is the value of it? Who's responsible for approving it? In a network drive structure, you didn't really have a really good way to do that outside of folders. But in SharePoint Online and many platforms like it, you have the ability to apply this information in columns. Those columns can be used to change how people see the information, to filter it out so you're only getting documents relevant to a particular topic, and also for automation. So if I have an accounts payable item that has an amount and a vendor and an invoice, and I have a column that says responsible approver, I can create a workflow that will automatically send that information to somebody who's intended to approve that invoice and allow them to approve it online and send it back to my accounts payable clerk with an approval that's auditable. So identifying what kind of metadata that you would like to associate with the different types of content. And when you're doing that, I highly recommend, and it's most successful when you include the teams who are going to use that data. Typically, we might think, okay, we'll just get the information from the managers or the leadership, and that's definitely relevant. But there's always value in pulling in a few frontline workers who work with this content on a day to day basis because they're the ones who know what information they need or what their process looks like on a day to day basis. So by working through these steps, you can be ready before the technical migration. It generates buy-in from the organization, and it also saves you time, money, and effort in the technical migration because you don't have to fight with duplicates or any of these issues. You can do a much smoother process in that way. So I'm going to walk you through sort of a typical migration preparation process. We do these in the business with the business to help ensure that we're really ready when the technical part of the migration is going to come to pass. So first, we're going to identify individuals within the organization who have insight. This should be a large cross section. It shouldn't be one position or role, but you should look or seek to find people who are early adopters of technology, who are in both frontline and management positions, who do different types of jobs, because together as a team, they're going to provide you with the insight you need to make sure that the whole organization gets the best and most out of the migration. You want to set your archive standards for content, such as a date for cutoff, i.e., anything older than 7 years will be archived, 5 years will be archived, or projects that are closed will be archived, and we're only going to start in the new system with active projects and new projects, different types of things. But decide as an organization based on the things that are important to you, your regulatory requirements, audit requirements, etc., what that archive standard is going to be. And then, like we said, identify the content that should be associated with metadata that should be associated with the content, such as the department, the type of document, who the content owners are. Is it a date, month, year specific? Those types of information. And you'll probably set those standards differently for different types of information that will appear for different departments or within different document libraries. Confirm the validity of the content. Review and clean up your old or unneeded items that are not to be archived. So you don't need to archive everything wholesale. You may look at something and say, you know what, the letterhead template from 2010 isn't relevant to us anymore. Our addresses has changed, our logos, our branding. We don't need to keep that. So rather than spending time and money either migrating it or archiving it and storing it, that can simply be removed from the environment before the migration takes place. Identify the requirements for access and security. Who should be accessing information in different areas of your organization? Who should be able to add or remove people? And how does that kind of come into play? In addition to that, when we talk about security and access requirements, depending on your industry, you may decide that you want to add sensitivity labels, data loss prevention policies, or other items from PureView that ensure confidentiality of content, and use AI to identify if there's any sensitive information in a particular document automatically, and apply labels, watermarks, or legal disclaimers. And finally, communicate to your teams throughout the life cycle of the project. Build excitement, build buy-in for the new system, listen to the feedback of your people. It's critical that they feel like they're being heard, because that is how they're going to get buy-in, or you're going to get buy-in. And the more buy-in you have from the people that work with and for you, the more likely your migration is to be successful. So before I hand this over to Jessica, who's going to start talking to us about the technical steps for migration, does anybody have any questions? You can put a question in the Q&A or chat, or I have given you guys microphones, so you're perfectly able to unmute yourself if you do have any questions. Okay, I'm going to hand this over to Jessica. Feel free to pop a question in chat or QA at any time. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. I will start sharing my screen first, and then let me know if everybody can see it. Share window. Okay.
We've got you.
Okay, so let me skip the part of the presentation. I don't know if I tried to put it in the screen.
We're currently seeing your team screen.
Oh, okay. I'm not sharing my entire. Okay, 1 second then.
Maybe I'll just jump in while you're doing that, Jessica, just to let everyone know. I've been doing a quick chat about recordings. I did post that we have a YouTube channel, so all of our past webinars are there. So please take a look. Also, you should subscribe to the channel too, because this particular webinar will be posted up there as well. So many ways to get a copy of this recording. We also can send directly out recordings as well. So please reach out to us and also jump on that channel. You get a chance to see some more. The floor is yours, Jessica.
We've got the right screen now, Jessica. We can see your PowerPoint.
Now, I can see it either. Okay, so let me just skip this part that you already talked about. And yeah, this is where I start. So I'm gonna be talking mostly, I know Tamara mentioned a lot of type of migration that we can do from OneDrive, but I'm gonna be more focusing in the SharePoint part of the migration and tips that it will help you to run a successful migration from our perspective. Like, we have been experiencing a lot of migration and a lot of problems through the process. So it's like, okay, I found this problem and how they will fix it. So it's like, with the time and with the experience of doing migration, this is basically what I end up having as a tip for migrating. So technically, if you're migrating from SharePoint on-prem to online, you have to do some manual things and some things that you can run through any like software that you want to use for migration or PowerShell. So there is different ways to do a migration. Don't take the one that like the step by step as, oh, you have to do this and this and this all the time, but it will be mostly what we normally do for migrating. What are the kind of like errors or issues we found in certain type of migration. So I will be guiding you in every single one of those. So the first thing we do, if it's a SharePoint migration from on-prem to online, I need to build the site that I'm going to be migrating to online if I don't have it yet. So let's say I don't have the SharePoint site, I have to create it. The first thing is create the site collection, right? It can be depending on what you need or what is like what was the analysis on what the kind of site you need. It's like, it's going to be a team site or it's going to be a communication site, depending if that site is going to be a hub or I'm going to be moving subsite as part of one hub. So everything will be depending on how you want to migrate things. but I will encourage you to choose each one depending on your needs. But also, if you want to select team side, but you are not planning to use any Office 365 group, I encourage you to use the other options and create a team site. So that will create the site without any Office 365 group associated to it. If you do want it, you can click team site and that will create the Office 365 group for you. And same for communication site if you want to make it as a hub site, right? There's different kind of the site collection that you can create. Once you have the site created, the next step, it will be giving your team, the team that you're going to be working on, access as a site collection administrator. Why is not like a site owner or edit? It's important to have a site collection administrator because the person, or like let's call the tester or the developer, maybe the PMs, they need to have full access to everything. So I'm talking about doing this in the source and the destination as well. In the source, because it's important to have access to everything that is in there, even if it's like it has unique permissions. If you do have something that has unique permission and you have only full control, you won't be able to see it. So with site collection administrator, you are giving the full control of your team members or the person that are going to be working in this migration, full access to everything that is hidden. Let's call it hidden. So of course, after you finish the migration, you can remove the tester or the developers or the PM or your team or anyone that was involved in the migration. They don't need to be site collection administrator anymore, but in the process, during the process, this is basically what you should do. So once you do that in the source and in the destination, it's like, okay, now you're ready to go with the next step for me will be enable the custom script on the SharePoint site you created. So that part of this the migration is like, it's not mandatory, but it will be an important step on migration. But as I mentioned here in the slides, before you allow custom script on site in your organization, make sure you understand the security implication of it. So I'm not going through the security implication of this, but this is basically the next step, what I would do after creating the SharePoint site. It can be through PowerShell, easy, as like you can find it in even a Microsoft website, like which is the PowerShell script that you can use, and this is like the example of it. You have to put the site URL of the source and the destination, and then you just enable it. Okay, so this is the next part, and I'm saying the order is not like you don't have to do it in this order, but it's basically what it works for us when we were doing like big migration, is always have like consistency and what to do next. And this is like this the step 1, step 2, so that we're not missing anything. And also when I finish this presentation, I'm gonna show like what I was doing personally when I was doing migration to not forget any other steps. So copy the site collection feature, it will be my next step. And this is gonna be a manual process. So basically you need to go to the source and the destination side and mirror the same features that you have. Of course, you're gonna have probably in the on-prem the copy workflows that you don't need anymore, so you can skip that one, but most of the time will be mirroring whatever you have in the on-prem to online or your destination, source and destination site. So once you copy that, and as I say, I don't think there is any script or nothing that it would do it like automatically. So it's something that you have to do manually. So you go to copy content type using script. So as I say, you can use script. It will be easier for the company to run this through a script because it's a it's a big process. Some companies, they will have a lot of content types they are using in the source. And let's say they have over 50 content type, but they're only using 10 of them. So I'm not, for example, I'm not a developer, but I understand coding. So that's why I was like able to run scripts. So they were like, the developers were creating those scripts, or if you find it online and say, run the scripts to find the content type that are only in use and copy over to the source. Or you can just have on a script to copy every single content type that you have in your source and copy it over to the destination. It will depend on if you have like a developer in your company to ask for, okay, can you build me a script to do this? Or it will, like, to be honest, you can find
Jessica,
it online. Yes.
can you hit the hide button at the bottom of the page where it says
Oh,
Teams is
yes.
sharing?
I thought it was just for me. Yeah. Okay.
No problem.
I thought it was just for my screen. Yeah, so I was just mentioning that you can find this script online or have your own developer to make this script for you. For example, our script was about content, like the company that we were migrating has a lot of content types, and like probably 5 or 10 of those that were in use only. So we ran a script to identify those content types that are in place in libraries, and then move those only ones over to the source. If you don't have, let's say your company doesn't have any content type, this part is like not even necessary, so you don't have to do it at all. Or if you just want to move content types manually, you can also do that. There is another step that it will depend if you have it or not. For example, the side columns. Some companies, they also use custom columns, and this is something that you have to do a manual process to creating those columns back from the destination to the source. But you can also do that through a script. So you can find your own script, you can make your own script to do that. Otherwise, you have to do it manually. But it's super important to check if it's in the source, you do have side column created and that have been in use in your libraries and your destination site. You have to move that in your destination site. Where to check? Go to site settings and site columns, and then you're gonna find in some libraries, for example, that you have managed metadata. So this is something that it will affect the migration if you don't analyze it first, because you need to copy those content types from the source to destination even before to do the content migration. If you don't do it before, you're going to have a lot of errors when you are migrating your metadata, right? So check if you have side columns, and check if you have managed metadata on it. One problem that it was part of one of migration was it was side columns defined as mandatory, but the value wasn't available anymore. Let's say I have 5 values in the source, but then remove it, so they have only 4. So the 5th one was still in the metadata, but when I was planning to move, I didn't have it. So to fix that, what we did is select the side column, find, and change the setting for filling choices from no to yes. So what that is doing, this is doing basically is saying if the value is not found, let's say the choice option B is not part of the content type anymore, but you have it as a metadata, and you're not going to get an error if you do this. So basically, it will fill in choices as a text, that option. I don't know if like maybe you can ask me a question about this, and it's hard to explain without showing you in a real site how that looks like. But basically, is if you have choices that doesn't exist anymore in the source. You have metadata that is already using these choices. This is basically what we did to allow to move that information even if it wasn't part of the choices as a text. So allowing the filling choices to yes will prevent to have a lot of errors when you're migrating your metadata from the source to destination. Sometimes you don't have an enable, so that part you have to actually go and enable it. So this is like, I try to show the best screenshot that I like that can represent that. I know like I have to navigate to show you like click here, go there. So basically it's like it's what I did in the previous screen, but this is a little bit more technical and only will happen if you are actually using content type. If you're not, this is not, it should be any other concern than enable this part. So to fill in properties is disabled. You need to go to the term store, right? And whatever your site collection URL is, and like from the submission policy, change the close to open. That will allow you to have this option enabled to change it from no to yes. Okay. So also, what also is important is if you have site columns that are not optional, so those are mandatory fields, and I will encourage you to change that back to optional, because you will have less problems when you are migrating your content. If you do have something that is optional, and then when you are migrating, that information is not there anymore, that metadata is not the same, you will have issues with, okay, there is a certain numbers of items or documents that couldn't move because of this. So using a script, you can also change that to optional and not make a site column mandatory. And then if you actually need it in your destination site, you can just go and check it in your destination site manually, or run the same script to enable it back. But as long as you are migrating data, I would encourage you to have it as an optional, not mandatory. Depend on the tool that you're going to use to migrate. In this case, we use a lot of ShareGate, but as I say, you can use PowerShell, you can do some step manually, or you can use other tools. You have to make sure that you copy the permissions from the source to the destination. You copy the permissions level. So for example, if you have custom permission levels, with the tool that you have, it copy those on over, and then so you can use it in your destination site. The other kind of group or permission that you have to move separately from everything, it will be the permission groups. So you move it, you find it, you move it, and once you have that, and I just showing you here like where to go and find it, but site permissions. And then finally, whenever you have your structure, you run the script for content types if you have it, you run the script for enable customs. So everything, when everything is ready by structure, I mean, in the SharePoint side is where I do encourage you to separate the structure from the content itself. I know if you're, for example, you use ShareGate, you will have this option for copy all together at the same time. But we realized we were having a lot of problems sometimes copying just the structure, and we weren't sure like which documents was or weren't copying. So we decide to split it, and once we decide to split it, so copy the structure first and then go to copy the data, was giving us less errors than just copy everything together and then try to fix it. It's like removing everything and doing over. So it's better to, as a tip, of course you don't have to, but it's like um, for my experience, it was working better when we were copying the structure first. What do I mean by structure? It's like all the list and all the document library you have, site pages, everything empty. So only the site content of it. And then before moving the documents or the items that you have in your library or list, I would encourage you to consider a couple of things. For example, activate the versioning. Sometimes it happens that the version is not active, so you were like you have to mirror that from the source to destination manually. There is certain things you have to do manually as well. For example, if you have a logo, there is nothing that you can do to copy the logo from one source to destination, so you have to do it manually. Once you finish, you have to set the old source to read only, so people cannot make modifications anymore. So whenever you are doing like the Delta migration, is the migration you do after the migration, just to move the documents that are new after the migration. So we encourage you to close the site so people cannot make changes anymore, and that will be part of the process to consider. The workflow migration is important because if you know from Microsoft, and if you're using Microsoft Server, like the version 2013 or older, you probably have workflows using SharePoint Designer, or you have forms using Infopad. Those things, when you are doing migration, you can move it over, but Microsoft doesn't support those anymore. So most of the time, this migration will be something manually for you to do. It's like, okay, I have a workflow approval, but I want to move to the Power Automate approval, not using the SharePoint Designer approval anymore. So you have to do this manually. Same for Infopad form that you want to move. Makes, let's say, now I have the online version. Can I use the Power App instead of Infopad? The answer is yes, but you have to rebuild it. There is no way to move an Infopad from Power App without rebuilding it. So there is no tool that will do that. So, as I mentioned here, custom form is I was talking about Infopad, so things to consider. And then at the end, what I will do once I have everything ready is move the content. That will give you less errors, as I say, than moving the structure and the content together. And you will still have errors, and you will still have to do a lot of things manually to check the source and destination. But it will be less error as long as you follow like the step that I was mentioning before. After moving the content, I think you have the what we call it incremental migration. So you do, after the migration, you do another migration only for the content that is new from the day you migrated. And then I want to show you before pass it over back to the team, or if you have any other questions, to show you guys what I was doing when I was working with big migrations. For example, we have batches that we say from 6 batches, I'm gonna migrate to this. I am talking about batches is because like I have like 1,000 sites that I need to move from here to here. I'm not gonna work in 1,000 sites like the same day. Probably every single step that I have here is to make sure that for every single site that I'm migrating, let's say batches, one will be 6 sites only. For 6 sites, I'm going to be following my, I use Excel, but you can have different ways to do it. It's like to make sure I did everything that is in place for every single site. So create a site for each, enable the custom script on each, then the site collection feature. So I'm gonna make sure that I complete everything, so I'm not forgetting anything when you are working with not just migrating one site, or let's say you are migrating only one. Probably you don't need to follow like a big sheet that this one, or just follow one side and say, okay, let's remember that I have to do create the site, enable the custom script, blah, blah, blah. So until I finish my step, I will be done. But if you are working with big batches of site, to not forget what you have to do next, I encourage you to have something like this. And then in preparation for production, it's like maybe you're going to be working here with the testing part or the tester group, where they're going to be checking, and maybe you're going to be part only from the testing, not the migration. So what to consider after the migration is complete. So certain things that you have to do manually as well. So I would encourage you to have another system for which one is the old site and which one is the new site for it, and then compare, because you will have probably a homepage in SharePoint on-prem. It will look a little bit different if you work with like the classic from on-prem to modern. It's like it's not gonna migrate the same way. If you wanna make it from classic to modern, you have to do it manually. If you have web parts in the classic, this web part probably is not available anymore in modern, so you have to find a way to make it look similar, but it won't be a migration, it will be a redo. Or if you keep want to use the classic, it will be the same one, but it's like in modern doesn't exist anymore. So maybe in the future, I don't know, it can be in 5 years, the classic is not going to be available anymore. You have to do modern, and you have to translate or rebuild your classic to modern anyways. And then closing the site, as I mentioned before, is important. So users are not making changes in the old site anymore whenever you finish the Delta migration. If you have, for example, a communication site where you have to copy the navigation, the left navigation, the top navigation manually. So it can be a lot of time consuming, and you have to do it manually, and then check with the tester group, like that all the links are pointing to the new one and not the old one. So there is not a script that will do that for you. You have to do it. And then, as I mentioned before, everything, if you want everything in modern, you have to rebuild it. So check that. You can check the default columns are in place, the mandatory content type. So this is basically my document that I was following to not miss anything. But what also is important, even I think I forgot to mention, is before the migration, make sure do an analysis on those things like workflows, infopad, and also documents that you have. If you use on-prem, probably you use the check-in, check-out option. So if you have something that is check it out, like it won't be available for migration. So do this analysis as how many um, documents checking out do you have. So you have to make it available for migration. So the owner needs to go there and say, okay, I have 10 documents that are checked out. If I don't move it back to check in, it won't be part of the migration. So making the tester life better for, like, if you are a developer or you are going to be in the tester group, it's super important to check those things. And then you're going to be comparing how many, after you finish the migration, the first test you're going to do is basically to compare how many documents that I have here in the source and how many in the document that I have in the destination. Sometimes the number would be the same, but most of the time the number would be, oh, there is 3 documents missing. How can I find 3 documents missing from 1,000 documents that I have here? So it's like things that you have to find out manually, to be honest. But most of the time, I will say was because the 3 documents that were missing from the source to destination, they were checking out. So you have to like tell them, okay, check this in, and then I will move those 3 only. But it's like a lot of manual things, even if you use a tool or use PowerShell to do most of the heavy stuff, but you still, there's a lot of works that you have to actually take care and do manually. So I don't know. I need to drink a little bit of water, but if there is any question, I know it's like some of the things that I mentioned, it will be from a different team working on it. Sometimes it's going to be the developer, sometimes it's going to be the PM, and like doing the analysis of things that are not going to be part of the migration, or even the analysis will be, okay, I have subsites and I don't want subsites anymore. I want a separate site collection for subsite. Microsoft very much encourage you to do that instead of using subsites, but it's going to be more like a decision before to migrate any data, right? So that was my part of the presentation, the technical part. But if you have questions, let me know.
Yeah, so at this point, we wanted to kind of open this up to specific questions. If you guys have ideas or particular scenarios in your own business that you wanted to sort of bring up or say, how would you handle a particular scenario, we're open to answering any questions that you may have. So I'm going to give everybody just a quick minute to see if we do have any questions or areas that we wanted to know more about. I have, I think, allowed everybody to use the mic. But if there are no questions, I'm just going to, for a moment, hand it over to John, who's just going to give you a little bit more information and talk about our process.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. Thanks, Jessica. Actually, didn't get a chance to mention my role at Spot Solutions. I am the director of sales. I'm sure everyone kind of knew that as well, but it's always good to keep everyone informed on who's who here. Again, yeah, thanks everyone for being part of this. One of the great things about being part of this webinar is we're going to set up an exclusive opportunity for you to connect with us, with our SharePoint experts, and just, you know, our experts at Spot Solutions. So we'll provide you an hour free consult with us. So I'll follow up with you after all the attendees and people who have registered, so you have access to connect with us. I'm sure you might have some questions that don't get answered during this particular webinar, or you want to kind of dig into some other business processes that you like us to automate. But we're here to help as well. So I know there's stuff that does come up. So I will be following up with that as well. And I mentioned earlier regarding the recordings, we'll put that up on our YouTube channel as well, just like our past webinars, as well as if you have any questions, you can shoot us a note if you want any kind of direct recording sent to you. You can send that to us at info@spotsolutions.com as well. So thank you so much. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Tamara.
Thanks, everybody. It's been great having you here. Just to sort of reiterate in terms of the tools that we're talking about in this webinar, Jessica was talking from a technical migration standpoint, primarily about using an industry standard tool called ShareGate. There are other tools out there, so we're somewhat agnostic. The steps that we've talked about here in terms of preparing your organization as well as the technical migration are pretty much the same regardless of what tool you choose to use. We're just sharing the tools that we're using ourselves. So there are a lot of ways that you can go about that. In terms of communication planning and change management, I talked about preparing your organization for a migration before you start it, especially with communication. And at Spot Solutions, we tend to use the ADKAR methodology of change management to build awareness and generate excitement. But any method that you want to use is good. That said, not everybody sort of has a methodology for that that's part of their organization. So I'm just really quickly going to provide you with a little bit of information about what ADKAR is. So ADKAR is an acronym. It's a model for business change and governance, and it stands for awareness first. The first step is to build awareness in the organization that a change is going to happen and why. And then D is for desire. So once people understand something's changing, you want to build some desire amongst them to be a part of that change by letting them know how this change is going to positively impact or affect their work, their day, their role. Then we build knowledge so that they start to understand how that change is implemented, what that change means, and get more comfortable with the new system. And then we want to start building ability. So ability comes in the form of training to make sure people understand how to use the new system in advance of it being in place. And you want to make sure that you don't provide training too far before the migration is complete, because if you do that, people will forget what they have learned. But having continuous opportunities, potentially training videos, as well as live training sessions before you go live, helps people have the ability to get used to the new system that you're implementing. And finally is reinforcement, making sure people continuously throughout the project and also after the project remember why we did this, understand what the value is, and are given the knowledge and training that they need to be able to effectively use the new system. Typically, whenever you change from one system that people are really comfortable with to a new system that they don't know well, there's a brief drop in efficiency as people learn the new system and learn the new tools that they're going to be using. But once that sort of month or couple weeks passes, as people continuously use that new system, we typically see quite a significant uptake in efficiency and the effectiveness of their work, because the new system has been designed in a way that's going to support the type of work that they're doing on a daily basis. So there's always going to be a little bit of frustration at first, as I need to look in a new place to find my tasks or my information. But if you prepare your organization well, that's going to be a really short period of time, and you're going to come out of it stronger and with a better platform for everyone.